Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make and use actions in Adobe Illustrator. Actions are sort of like a bag of commands that you customize and hand to Illustrator and say, here, do this, and then sit back and watch it happen. It can really speed up your workflow. So think about the tasks that you do all the time. Wouldn't it be great instead of having 8 or 10 steps to do something that you can do it with one click of your mouse? That's what I'm going to teach you in this video. So let's get started. To access the action panel, there's not a keyboard shortcut, so we go up to Window, down to Actions, and I'll grab the Actions tab, and I'm going to dock it just to the left of the Properties panel. When I see the blue line, I'm going to release my mouse, and now it's locked in place. Now we see Illustrator comes with preloaded actions, which are in the default actions set. And we're not going to be using these, but you may want to come back and check them out later. What I first want to do is look at the Actions panel. Now this left column that has these check marks tells Illustrator which of the actions you want it to perform. There are some actions that have a lot of different tasks inside of them, and you might want to skip some of them. All you do is click on the little check mark, and Illustrator will come down through the actions, skip the ones that are unchecked, and then complete the action. I'd better add those checks back in though. Next we have the column with the modal controls. Now modal control will cause a pause in the action, allowing you to enter a value into a dialog box, and then the action will continue. You can toggle these on and off just like you do the check marks. Not every task is going to need a modal control, and as you begin to work with actions, you'll figure out which ones do and which ones don't. This next column has a lot of information in it. First, we have our sets. That's what Illustrator calls these little file folders. Inside the sets, we have our actions. Inside the actions, we have the tasks that are a part of the action. And as we see here, some of those actions have a lot of tasks, and yet some of them only have one. Now, as you begin to work with actions, I highly recommend leaving Illustrator's default action set alone. Just close it up and create your own set to add your actions to, and I'll move to the bottom bar to show you how that's done. This little file folder is the Create New Set icon, and when I click here, I have a dialog box that allows me to give my new set a name. I'm going to type Tutorial and say OK. Now I have my own set in the Actions panel. Now to create an action, I come back down to the bottom bar and click on the little box with a plus on it. This is the Create New Action icon, and this brings up a dialog box where I give my action a name. I'm going to call this Rotated Design. And for the set, I have a pull-down menu. Remember I said don't use the default actions. I'm going to leave this checked on Tutorial. Then if I want a function key, which works like a keyboard shortcut, I'll click on this little pull-down menu, and here's a list of what I can choose from. I'll choose F1, and if I wanted to, I could also use Shift and Command by just clicking these. In fact, if F1 is already in use, Illustrator will automatically click on one of these. But I like to keep this simple because in addition to pressing F1, I also have to hold the function key down to make it work. Finally, we have an option to add color to our action, and I'm going to give this a red color and press record. Now that I've pressed record, the little circle on the bottom bar is red, and that's how I know that my steps are going to be recorded from this point on. So everything I do with my mouse and everything I do with keyboard shortcuts is going to be recorded and show up under the name of my action if it can be recorded. What I've discovered is there's some commands that can't be recorded, and there's not a list to tell you which ones can and can't be, so it's kind of a trial by error as you go through and figure that out. But there are some tasks that won't record that you can type in manually, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a little bit. Then once you have all of your actions recorded, come down to the bottom bar once again and click on the square on the left to stop recording. Now let's move up to the top right corner and press here for a flyout menu, and you're going to see the same options up here. I can create a new action, a new set. I can also duplicate an action. Now this comes in handy when you have two actions that are going to be similar. So you create one, and then instead of starting over from scratch with the other one, you just duplicate the first one and then make the changes that need to be made in the second one. Here we have delete. That's the same thing as the trash can on the bottom bar. That allows you to delete either a task or an action or an entire set. And then finally, we can even start playing from here. Now we'll talk about these other options as I go through the video, but what I'd like to do now is go ahead and start recording an action and show you how that works. My first action is going to be movements that will take place on a rectangle. I don't want to create the rectangle in the action though, so I'll get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and drag a rectangle out on the artboard and then give it a fill color. And now I'm ready to start recording. Now, I've already created the rotated design action. I don't have any tasks in it because I stopped recording, but I'm going to click the record button. It turns red, and now everything that I do is going to be recorded. The first thing I want to do is rotate and copy this rectangle. So I'll get the rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R. I'll hold down the shift key so my rotation snaps at 45 degrees, and I'll hold down the option key to make a copy. And when I have a 45-degree rotation, I'll release my mouse. Now the rotated square is the only object that's selected, and I need both of these selected. So I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. Select both of the squares, but I don't see that reflected in my action. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut because I think that will work. The keyboard shortcut for select all is Command A, and sure enough, the select all task has been added. Now I'm going to go to the properties panel, and in the Pathfinder area, I'll click to unite these two pieces and then move up to Object, down to Path, and create an offset path. I'll leave this at minus 0.5 inches, which means that the offset path is going to be a ½ inch inside the object. If this was a whole number, it would be a ½ inch on the outside of the object. I'll click OK, and then once again, I need to select both of the objects. I'll use the keyboard shortcut Command A, and now select all is another recorded task in our action. Now I want to punch out the inside of the design, so I'll go to the Properties panel in the Pathfinder area and click on this fourth Pathfinder tool, which is Click to Exclude. And when I click here, Illustrator excludes anything that was overlapping on these two objects, and this is what I'm left with. Now the final thing I want to do is come up to Effect, down to Stylize, and add a drop shadow. I'm going to change this blur to 0 and say OK. Then I'll deselect the design with the keyboard shortcut Shift Command A, and that finishes my actions, so I'll press the Stop Recording button. Now the first thing I want to do is check my action to see if it works. So I'll select this object and delete it. I can't leave it on the artboard because I have select all in the actions and it would be included, which wouldn't be a good thing. So I'll get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and drag out a rectangle. And then I want to use my function key, so I'll select the name of the action and then press function F1, and the action has begun. And look how fast that was, but I don't have a drop shadow, so I'm going to have to figure out what the problem is there. I can look at the list and maybe figure it out, or I could also watch the action on my artboard. Now the way it is right now, it's super fast, but I can come to this Flyout menu and choose Playback Options, and this gives me the opportunity to slow that down. Right now, accelerated is selected, and that's what you want for any of your actions that you know are working, because you want those to go fast. I could choose step by step, and that would slow it down a little bit, long enough for me to see the steps, but I'm going to actually pause just a little bit. And I'm going to change this to 2 seconds because I think that's going to be long enough, and I'll say OK. Then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and click the design, press the delete key, get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and drag out a rectangle, and I'll press Function F1 to get started. We rotate, and then we're going to select all, then we're going to unite, then create an offset path, then select all again, go back to Pathfinder to punch it out, and deselect all. But wait a minute, there was supposed to be the drop shadow right after that Pathfinder tool, and it's missing. Well, that turns out to be one of the actions that can't be recorded. However, it is an action that we can type in manually. I have the rotated design action selected. I'll come up and get my flyout menu and choose Insert Menu Item. When the dialog box opens up, I have to have the exact terminology that Illustrator wants, and sometimes that takes a little guessing. I'm going to start out with a few letters here, drop, and choose find, and this is picking up something else in my computer, so I'll highlight that and delete it. I'm going to have to use a few more letters, so I'll type in drop shad and try the find here, and I see effect, stylize, drop shadow. So I never would have figured that out on my own, but Illustrator's telling me what the action should be, and I press OK. Now, because I had the title of the action highlighted when I chose Insert Menu Item, Illustrator has added the task to the very bottom of the list, which is not where it needs to be. Now I can either select it and drag it into place. This is where it needs to be, or I'm going to delete it and show you what to do so Illustrator puts it in the right place. We're going to select Pathfinder because we want the action to come right after that. And with Pathfinder selected, I'll come back up and try Insert Menu Item again. I'll type in drop shadow, choose find, and say OK. And you'll see Illustrator adds it right underneath what was selected. So let me get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. I'll click this item and press delete, and get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and drag out a rectangle. Come back up and click on the name of the action, and then press Function F1 to begin. We're on that 2-second delay, so it's going to be a little slower, but I want you to see everything that's happening. And when we get to the drop shadow, Illustrator is actually going to pause and give me an opportunity to make any changes in the dialog box that I want. I'm going to leave these the same, and then I'll say OK. It finishes the deselect all, and I know the action is complete because the highlight is now back up to the top title. Now, just so you see how fast this is, I'm going to change the playback options. We know this works now, so I'll click on accelerated and say OK. Delete this design, get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and drag out another rectangle. Press Function F1, and here we have the drop shadow, and say OK, and that is pretty fast. Now I'm going to delete this design, and we're going to create one more action. I'll twirl this closed, and this time we'll come up here and say New Action. This is going to be 8 blended colors. We'll leave it in the tutorial set. For the function key, I'm going to choose F3, and for the color, I'll say green and press Record. Now for this action, I'm not starting out with an object on the board. The action is actually going to create the objects. So I'll get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and drag out just a small slender rectangle. Notice Illustrator is using the most recent fill and stroke color that was used. Now I'm going to create a copy. I'll move up to Object, Transform, Move, and I'll type in a 10-inch horizontal move. I'll leave vertical set to 0. I'm not worried about the other values, and I'll press copy. I need both of my rectangles selected, so I'll use the keyboard shortcut Command A, and then I'm going to go up to Object, down to Blend, and choose Blend Options. What I want is specified steps. You might have to go to the pull-down menu to find that, and I'm going to leave 8 selected here and say OK. Nothing happens yet, but I'll come back to Object, down to Blend again, and this time choose Make. And Illustrator gives me 8 colors, which are to be a blend of the first rectangle and the second rectangle. Now, in order to have blended colors, I'm going to have to add a stop in my action that allows me to change the color of this rectangle before I create the blend. So I'll look at the list to see where that should happen. I create the first rectangle, and then I make a copy and move it, and then I select all, and I think it needs to happen before I select all, so I'll click right here on Move, come up and insert a stop. And when the dialog box comes up, I'm going to type in Change Color and click Allow to Continue and say OK. So here I have a stop added, and let's see if that allows me to change the color. I'm going to delete what I have on the artboard, come back up to the 8 blended colors and press Function F3, and Illustrator pauses and tells me to change color. Now if I come directly over to the color fill icon, listen what happens. I get a funny noise, and Illustrator doesn't let me do that. If I click Continue, Illustrator is going to go on through the rest of the actions and not give me time to change the color. So what I've got to do is click Stop. When I click Stop, then I have an option to change the color and then continue to play the rest of the actions out. When we get to Blend, Illustrator has added a modal control which pauses to allow me to make any changes here. I'm not going to change anything. I'll just say OK, and Illustrator continues with the rest of the actions, and this time I have a really nice blend. Let's come back over and see what else we have. In addition to Insert Stop, you can insert a select path or select an object. Action Options allows you to change any of the options on the action. The Playback Options, you've already seen those. Clear Actions would clear out everything. We don't want to do that. Resetting Actions will allow you to come back and reset the default actions if you go through and mess those up and want to get back where Illustrator started. Load Actions allows you to import actions that you've either saved previously or you're purchasing or receiving from somebody else, and Replace Actions is kind of along that same line. Save Actions is grayed out because I don't have a set selected. Illustrator doesn't allow you to save individual actions. You can only save sets. So when I select my set and come back and look, I actually am able to save the actions now. So I'm going to click on Save Actions, and Illustrator takes me to the folder I already have set up, Susan's Illustrator Actions. You can save these folders wherever you want, but I really recommend that if you have some actions you've worked hard on and you don't want to lose them, save them in a file in case you end up having to reinstall Illustrator. So it's given the name that I have of the set. I'll come down and click Save, and now if something happens to this set, like I accidentally deleted it, then I can get it back. I'll come back up to the top and choose Load Actions. Now it's conveniently taking me to the folder where the actions are because I've just saved those actions. You're going to need to remember where your folder is so you can navigate to it. But if you forget, just do a search on .aia files and you should be able to locate it that way. So all I have to do is select Tutorial, come down and click on Open, and now my set has been restored. Let's come back up and look at this menu. There are a couple of other things I want to show you. This is our button mode, and when we're in button mode, the action panel looks completely different. All we can see is the name of the action and its function key if there is one. I'm not able to expand my actions to look at the individual tasks, but this is where the color comes in. If you've got a lot of actions that are similar, you may want to color code them to make them easier to see. One of the reasons you might like the button mode is you can simply click on the title to activate that action. Let me move up here and turn that off though. And the last thing is batch. I'll click here and just give you kind of an overview. Batch is designed to allow you to apply actions to a group of objects that are all in different folders. Now, the one thing I've discovered about batch is your best results are going to be if you only have one task per action. So if you have several things you need to do, make an action with one task, execute that, then make an action with another task and execute that. Otherwise, things can get a little messy. We're not going to do anything else with batch in this video, but if you think this is something that might help your workflow, I encourage you to explore this option. I'll just say cancel and close that out. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and more than that, I hope you've found it helpful. I've tried to include as much as I could about actions to help you get started in creating your own. Think about the things that you do over and over again and begin to work on actions that will speed your process up. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of my future tutorials, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.